Brody again has a meeting appropriate background. I like you've got a golden-crowned sparrow, Brody. That's great.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. I love it.
All right, well, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. If more folks show up, that's great. But welcome everyone to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for Thursday, October 8th, 2020. This meeting, as you will know if you look at Brody's background, is on sparrows. So we're going to get to talk about sparrows, and that should be a lot of fun. I'm going to skip all the usual starting of the meeting stuff because you already know how to do Zoom. We all know way more than we ever expected about how to do Zoom. I see Eve is here. Hello, Eve. It's good to see you. I've seen you put in some lists around, Santa Barbara County. In the last a week or two ago. So it's great to have you here. And I know you are a sparrow fan. I've seen you report many interesting sparrows on eBird in the past. Okay, well, so before we jump into the sparrow content, does anyone have any fun bird sightings from the last couple of weeks that they want to report? Feel free to just unmute and chime in. You're just all very anxious to hear about sparrows. The appeal of sparrows is very great. Okay, well then we'll talk about sparrows. So, oh, Brody, yes, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, one thing I've been seeing a few scaly-breasted munias.
The scaly-breasted munias, yeah, a recent arrival. That is a bird I had never heard of before a few years ago, and now they're seemingly everywhere. Yeah, that is, interesting, certainly, and they are different. I like that little kind of piping vocalization they make when they're flying by.
Yeah, and I think they were introduced from Australia.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that. I knew they were sort of, Asian something, in that area, but I'd never really researched them in detail. All right, well, okay. Anybody else with any other sightings they want to chime in about? Have any of you, I guess at this point, anyone who wants to see the curlew sandpiper up on the beach in Santa Barbara has probably seen it. Actually, I apologize for saying that. Jenny just told me that she's tried to see it 3 times and hasn't seen it. It is still there. So if you're really, hoping to see that bird, you can still go see that bird. All right, well, let's go ahead then. And oh, Mary Jo, did you have your hand up to share something?
Just that I saw Townsend warblers are in town. Did anyone see those? Because I'm beautiful little birdies.
They really are. Yeah, I've seen just a few of them around. I was sharing before we started that I've been spending most of my birding time lately hawk watching. I'm really still trying for one of those broad-winged hawks coming through in Montecito, and so far no luck on that. But it does kind of cut down on my running around chasing after warblers. Yeah, Brody, did you have something else?
Oh, when is the time to go again? Like right around now?
For the broad-winged hawks?
Yeah.
Until like another week or two, probably, there's still a decent chance of getting one coming through. But after that, the odds drop off very quickly. They are still reporting them up at Hawk Hill, up in the Marin Headlands. They had 20-something broad-winged hawks a couple days ago. So, I mean, they're coming by. I just got to be in the right place at the right time to see one. All right, so I will go ahead then and move on to sparrows. And, I have to start with a confession. I spent a good chunk of time early in my bird watching career not really properly appreciating sparrows. I thought of them as little brown jobs. They're hard to identify, they're small, they're nondescript. I'm just gonna, if I see maybe a white-crowned sparrow, I'll know that one, or a few others I knew and I'd put them on the list. But otherwise it was just, yeah, sparrows. I just would put down a generic sparrow number and call it a day. And it was actually a birder who I've run into again recently. He's a birder in Santa Barbara these days, although this was way before my Santa Barbara days that I had this earlier experience with him. But Rob Hoffberg is his name. And when I was in high school, I went birdwatching with him once because he was the older brother of my then girlfriend's best friend, which is an odd chain of connections. But anyway, he was a birder, and I didn't know anyone who was a birder really, or hardly knew anyone. So we went birding. And one of the things that he told me as we were out birding that day is that he was a big fan of sparrows. They were his favorites. He really liked sparrows. And it just boggled my mind. It just, it was something I hadn't considered before, that someone could actually like sparrows. You could actively appreciate sparrows, not just as something you had to identify to have a complete list, but that you would actively seek out. So that sort of changed my view. And over the years, I have come to appreciate sparrows more and more. So these days, I think of myself as very much a sparrow fan. And I hope that I can convey some of that if you are a sparrow fan, you'll enjoy this sparrow content. If you're not a sparrow fan, maybe you can become a little bit closer to being a sparrow fan, or at least considering being a person who pays attention to sparrows. I think they're pretty neat. So before I jump in and start talking about sparrows, I wanted to share a few books. I'm going to put this on speaker view, which I think will make the books more obvious on the YouTube live stream. But so this is Kaufman's Field Guide to Advanced Birding, Ken Kaufman's. And I've talked about this book before, but it has a very nice section on learning to identify sparrows. So if you're interested in doing a better job at figuring out what those sparrows are, this book has some really good advice on how to do that. And I'll summarize that just briefly and say, well, I'll get to it in a minute when we're actually looking at sparrows. And then another book that I really love, and this came out just maybe a year and a half ago. This is the Peterson Reference Guide to Sparrows by Rick Wright. And
out and then you can get in it.
Can we mute Penny, just because it's distracting to me to hear someone else? Thanks. Anyway, this Reference Guide to Sparrows is just a wonderful book, and Rick Wright is a really interesting writer. And it's too big for a field guide, but it's got lots and lots of sparrow content. It really is just a love letter to sparrows. And one of the things that he does that I find fascinating is he talks about not just the birds, but he talks about the history of human interactions with the birds. So he talks about the names of the birds and their discovery, and then their names changed, and then they were misidentified, and just he goes through all the details of sort of early ornithologists in North America as they catalog these sparrows. And it's just really cool and interesting content. So I highly recommend that book if you're looking for more sparrow information. Okay, with that said, does anyone have any input or last comments before we go ahead and jump into the slides? It's your last chance. It's going to be all sparrows all the way through from here on out. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And let's see if I can do this correctly. I want to share the sound so you can hear the sparrows. I think it's all optimized for video, though I don't think that's too important. And I will make it my browser window. And we will go to the actual presentation, and I'll go back to the beginning of the presentation. All right, so if I've done this all correctly, you should be seeing a sparrow. Do we have a sparrow? All right, we have thumbs up. Excellent. So we have a sparrow. All right, so here is a sparrow that we have a lot of in town. Just recently, they've come back. We'll talk about that. But sparrows are, of course, every group of birds, whenever I start off, I have to say that they're cool because they are very cool. And sparrows are relatively small. They are relatively nondescript. They're sort of brownish because they have to blend in. They eat seeds. They're on the ground a lot. So for their own protection, they have to blend in. A lot of them have quite distinctive head markings. So that's sort of where they get their sort of snazzy looks sometimes. They all tend to have these short conical bills that they use for cracking seeds. So far, I'm just talking about them as sort of what they have in common. But in fact, sparrows have a lot of variety. So here are 5 sparrows you can see in Santa Barbara County. And certainly at first glance, you could say, oh, gee, these all look very much the same. And the me of the past, the unenlightened me of my early birding would have said exactly that. Like, oh yeah, they're all small, they're brown, they're kind of, hard to see. That's what they are. But you know, with the eyes of love, the differences start to emerge. And if you study your sparrows, I think you'll find that they are in fact very distinctive. And really, there's just a few species, pairs, or closely related species that are really, really hard to tell apart. If you do your homework and you spend the time to learn these birds, they are not that hard to distinguish from each other if you can get a good look at them. Let's see. So I talked about the Ken Kaufman Field Guide to Advanced Birding and his chapter on sparrow identification. And one of the main things that he talks about is that you don't just try to, you know, when you look at a sparrow and you figure out, okay, it's a sparrow, you don't just start at, okay, which of the 50 sparrows is it? And try and immediately get down to species. He says, you know, go more methodically, figure out what genus it's in or what group of related sparrows it's in. Because in fact, sparrows do tend to have distinctive features. There are groups of them that are relatively, you know, they're somewhat similar, but once you start paying attention to the details, you see that they actually are in these distinctive groups where there'll be several species that have some features in common. So, you know, this song sparrow in the middle here, we'll put the names on them. So this song sparrow in the middle has a relatively long tail, a relatively large body, as compared to this brewer's sparrow. And in this shot, I've sort of resized the images so it's not immediately clear, but it's a smaller sparrow than the song sparrow. You know, if you saw a brewer's sparrow and a song sparrow next to each other, you could tell the difference. You'd be like, oh, that song sparrow is, or that one sparrow is bigger and that other sparrow is smaller. They have their own distinctive proportions. So some sparrows will have a relatively long tail, right? Like this song sparrow, this vesper sparrow, this black-throated sparrow all have relatively long tails. I don't actually have a good example of a shorter-tailed sparrow here, but say a Savannah Sparrow, if I had one here, or a Grasshopper Sparrow, have relatively short tails. So there are things you can look for in terms of their overall shape and proportions that will help you narrow things down. Another thing that will help you narrow things down and make your identification easier is their habits. Just where are you seeing them and how are they behaving? And again, as you get to learn them, you will learn to expect certain kinds of sparrows are going to show up in certain kinds of habitat, certain kinds of circumstances, and will behave in certain ways. And you know, they're birds, they move around occasionally. Something will be in a very wacky place that makes no sense in terms of your previous experience. But by and large, you know, the large majority of the time, they will be where you expect them to be. So that's very helpful. And you know, by starting with sort of those overall proportions and the location and the habitat and what species are expected to be there at that time of year, you can really get down to a very small list of candidate sparrows. And then, you know, you can start focusing in on the field marks, the plumage characteristics, or the color of the beak, or different things like that. And pretty quickly get your way to a solid identification. And then I haven't even mentioned, but voice, the vocalizations are super helpful with sparrows. A lot of them have pretty similar call notes, but you can learn to distinguish. It's usually sort of a high, thin, you know, sip, sip, you'll hear from sparrows. But some of them have more distinctive calls. And again, you can learn to use that as an important clue. And if they're singing, their songs tend to be quite distinctive. So if you've learned those songs and there are species that, you know, if they're on their breeding territory when they're singing, that can be really easy. You know, they announce themselves, here I am this species and I'm singing. Some of the other species like white-crowned sparrows like this, we've got an immature white-crowned sparrow down here in the corner. They sing pretty much all winter. You know, we have them here as a wintering species in the south part of Santa Barbara County, but they're out there singing. So, you know, you'll hear them and very quickly you'll become familiar with their song if you aren't already. And, you know, there'll be a hedge with 30 white-crowned sparrows in it, just making a big racket. And you'll know exactly what they are without even having to see them. Okay, let's move on. So I've broken up the sparrows we're going to talk about, and there are a lot of them. So I'm going to go pretty quick. But first, I've picked out these 9 species that I'm calling the easy to see sparrows in Carpinteria. So these are 9 species that if it's the right time of year, and currently we're at the time of year when you should be able to see all of these are sparrows you're going to come across just in your normal day-to-day bird watching around Carpinteria. You know, if you're fairly active and visiting, you know, a fair number of different habitats around Carpinteria, you're going to have a good chance of seeing all nine of these species. And then we'll go on to a group of somewhat harder to see birds, and then finally at the end,
You get pictures of
especially
everybody
hard
who's
ones. Did someone have a
trying-
comment? You know, I can only see a few of the thumbnails when I'm in the screen sharing mode, but if someone has something they want to say, just unmute and let us know. I'm going to keep on going. So I'm going to start off with this one, and this one does have sparrow in its name, but technically not a sparrow. So this is not, so sparrows, the official sparrows that we're talking about here are New World birds. They're North and South American. This is an old world species that has made itself very much at home in the New World. And let me go ahead and play some of its vocalizations. These are recordings from Zeno Canto. And this is a recording of this species made by Alain Malingru. The characteristic call note of this species. And give me a thumbs up if you heard that call, so I know that it's working. All right, excellent. And then here is some more, another kind of vocalization. If you've had these nesting under your Spanish tile roof, you know, under your eaves or under your Spanish tile roof, you hear this all summer long. And these, of course, are house sparrows. So super common all across North America. They have spread, they do quite well in human habitation. So as humans have spread all across North America, they have spread with us. You know, in Europe, where they're originally from, or at least in Great Britain, I've read that they're actually somewhat threatened. I mean, I don't know what their actual status is, but their populations have declined to the point that people are concerned about their welfare. But at least in North America, they seem to be doing quite well. So I'm not going to spend more time on them. Again, technically not sparrows in the same group we're talking about, but they do have sparrow in the name, so I wanted to mention them. But here is the male, here is the female. Go to your local fast food restaurant and throw a few fries out, and you will get close-up looks because they're very good at hanging around with people. But I'm going to move on to this species, which is also sort of gets an asterisk by its name for inclusion. Now, it doesn't have sparrow in its name, but this is actually a North American sparrow in the taxonomic sense. So here is a recording of its call by Ed Pandolfino. And then here's a longer vocalization, a song that they make. And that recording is by Richard Webster. And this is a dark-eyed junco. So doesn't have sparrow in its name, but it is a sparrow. You know, there are several different subspecies of dark-eyed juncos. You know, back when I started birding, they were separate species, and you had to work kind of hard to figure out which of the various junco species you were looking at. But now they lump almost all of them together into dark-eyed junco. Yeah, Brody, I see you have your hand up.
I was just gonna say, there's 1 or 2 different kinds we have around here. But I think that's like the pink-sided or something.
Yeah, you know, I'm not very good myself at all the different subspecies. There's what used to be called the Oregon junco, and then there's the pink-sided, which is sort of similar looking, but not as common around here. And then there's the slate-colored junco that I've seen a few of. Anyway, it made my life simpler when they all just got lumped into dark-eyed junco, and you know, so I just call them dark-eyed juncos. But yeah, I mean, I don't mean to belittle the efforts of those who like to continue to dice them up finer and get down to the subspecies level. I'll just point out, you know, I mean, it's a pretty distinctive looking bird. This beak is quite, you know, stands out, that pink beak, and then the dark hood. This is a male, I'm pretty sure. The females look similar, but they're more drab, you know, a little more muted in terms of the color pattern. And then something you can kind of see in this photo, the outer tail feathers, which are the ones that go on the bottom when the bird folds its tail up, are white. And when it flies, it's very noticeable. They have these broad white outer tail feathers when they're flitting away from you across a road or wherever you see them. They tend to spend a lot of their time on the ground. So, and they, you know, walking along a dirt road birding, you know, you always have, well, not always, a lot of times you will have dark-eyed juncos flitting away from you. And the, you know, the confirmation that yes, they're definitely dark-eyed juncos when you see those broad white outer tail feathers flashing as they're flying away. So I'm going to keep on going though, because we have a lot of species to talk about. So here again, here is a bird that does not have sparrow in its name, but it is technically a sparrow. It's a big sparrow. Here is a recording of this bird's vocalizations by Steve Hampton. You'll probably hear that call in my backyard anytime I go out of my backyard. And here is another vocalization. Here is this bird's song. And usually I pick out just 2 vocalizations to share, but this one I had to do this third one because it's such a cool sound. And this is actually, this is one of these sort of duet vocalizations where a mated pair will make both parts of this. Like you'll hear it and it's actually 2 birds that are collaborating on the noise they're making. Anyway, I really like that one. So this is the California towhee, which used to be the brown towhee. And then they split it and we got more species out of it. And so the local one became the California towhee.
John,
Yeah.
so what technically makes a sparrow a sparrow?
You know, I am not really prepared to give a good answer to that. I mean, I would say the birds that are in that family in the field guide. But it's a, you know, it's a question for ornithologists who argue back and forth about how exactly to organize all the different bird species and argue about what is and is not a species, as the case with the California towhee. It used to be considered a subspecies of a larger set of birds. You know, they tend to have this, I mean, just in terms of just sort of seat of the pants practical definition, they tend to have this sparrow type beak, a fairly short conical beak. They tend to eat seeds. They tend to hang out on the ground a lot, but not always. You know, again, I didn't prepare as well as I could have. There were so many birds to get together in the presentation. I didn't do as much background reading as I should have. So I apologize for not giving you a better answer.
Well, it sounds like when I'm outside and if I'm confused, I'm just going to default to sparrow.
Well, if they're brown and they're on the ground, that's a pretty good starting point, certainly to check that part of the field guide first. I would say look at the beak, you know, because most of the things that are not sparrows that could be confused with sparrows are going to have a longer beak or a different kind of beak. You know, I didn't talk about this, but a few non-sparrows that could be confused with sparrows are, you know, juvenile brown-headed cowbirds can look kind of sparrowish. They're on the big side for a sparrow, and their beak is a little long for a sparrow beak, but you could look in your field guide for that if you've got a bird that doesn't quite seem to match any of the sparrows that you think might be a sparrow. Another one is a female red-winged blackbird. They look, you know, to a certain, you know, quick glance, they look quite sparrowy. They're brown and streaky. And so again, check the beak. The beak's a little too long for a sparrow, and they've got some other characteristics that distinguish them. I don't know. I mean, we've started off by me talking about these sort of odd, not quite sparrows or sparrows that don't have sparrow in the name. We'll get down to real sparrows in just a second here, and then it'll just be all sparrow content. So here is one more towhee, and then this one It sounds like this. Here's a recording by James Link. So there's a lot of background birds in these Xenocanto recordings, which I love about them. But the sort of ring, that's the sound of this species. And then here's another recording. This is by Ron Overholtz. And this is the spotted towhee. So I guess, it used to be the rufous-sided towhee, but then the spotted towhee that we have out in the west was split, and the eastern towhee, is that what it's called? The one that's in the east? Those of you who are more familiar with your eastern birds can tell me if I'm right about that. I don't bird much outside of California. Yeah, Brody.
I'm just wondering, what's the best place you've seen to find these birds? Because I've really wanted to see one, but I can't find one.
Spotted towhees in particular? I would think that, they like chaparral. They're not around houses and lawns as much as the California towhee is. They're more out in the chaparral. Toro Canyon Park, I think you should have some spotted towhees there. If you could walk around, and I know, you live fairly close to there. If you could, they like underbrush. They like sort of staying in the thick underbrush. They're not really going to be out announcing their presence quite as much as some other birds. Learn their vocalizations, practice, listen to that call, that kind of re-call, and then that kind of trill that I was just playing. And if you're out, early in the morning, you should be able to hear some singing, and that'll guide you to one. But they're very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. Report back to us. Go look for some spotted towhees and let us know if you succeed.
John?
Yeah.
This Rita. Under the field guide, Stokes field guide, that one of the things they say to help identify them is to look for include breast dots on clearer streak breasts, eye rings, and white on the outer tail feathers seen in flight, which you mentioned, the white, but those might be helpful to them.
Yeah, those are all very good characteristics for a lot of these sparrows, to look for those things or the absence of those things. That will definitely help you narrow down what it is that you're looking at. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all really good. Okay, we're going to move on to actual sparrows that are actually called sparrows. So we've talked about this one some already, but this is the white-crowned sparrow. And we have a lot of them around right now, as I was saying earlier. Here's a recording of their call by Terry Davis. And then here's their song. This is by Doug Hines. So the adults look like this bird on the left with the zebra striped head. And there's a few different subspecies of them with slightly different configurations. And check your field guide again if you want to get down to the subspecies level and figure out exactly what variety of white-crowned sparrow you have. And then when you're out looking at a group of white-crowned sparrows, a lot of them are going to look more like this bird. And these are the immature birds. So it takes them, they have to get a little older before they get this zebra pattern on the head. And so the younger birds look like this. And some things to look for. So they're in the genus Zonotrichia or Zonotrichia, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And there's a few different sparrows like in that genus that we have. But they're relatively large for sparrows. So, all these are smallish birds, but when you see them compared to other sparrows, you see actually they're pretty big. They have a relatively long tail that tends to be kind of rounded on the tip. So some sparrows have more of a notch tail, which this bird actually looks like it has in this shot. but the white-crowned sparrow is more of a rounded tail, relatively long. The beak color is really helpful. So this kind of pinkish beak, I'm not sure what exactly to call this color, but this color, learn this color and study your white-crowned sparrows. Even the immature ones will tend to have a version of that kind of beak color. It's got sort of a warmish, kind of yellowish, orangish kind of cast to it. And that will help you to distinguish them from another Zonotrichia sparrow that we have, which looks like this. So this is a very closely related sparrow. This is the golden-crowned sparrow. And in the adult, there's actually, this is a breeding adult. There's a non-breeding look of the adult that's a little bit more muted on these head colors. And then this is like a first-year bird, an immature bird. They can look, again, in terms of most of their body, they look quite similar to the white-crowned sparrow, but the beak color is a real giveaway. See how it's kind of this grayish kind of beak? And I'll go back to the white-crowned sparrow, which is more of this yellowish, orangish beak. If you see a group of these sparrows hopping around on the ground, focus on that beak color, and that'll really help you distinguish. There may be, a golden-crowned sparrow mixed in with a bunch of white-crowned sparrows, or may all be one or all the other. But if you study that and then look at the crown pattern and the head pattern just to give you that confirmation that that's what you're looking at. Yeah, and they have a slightly different song. I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and play their song. I actually heard this song in Toro Canyon Park, we were talking about a minute ago, and it had me very confused for a while because I was not as familiar with them. I don't hear them singing as much as I hear the white-crowned sparrows singing. But this is a recording by Rachel Hudson of the golden-crowned sparrows song. It's almost, there's a vocalization that the mountain chickadee makes that's sort of evocative of that. And for a while, I thought that's what I had. I thought I had a mountain chickadee singing there, and that would have been sort of unusual. But I was set straight. So the glories of birding in the days of the internet is that you can get helpful experts weighing in and pointing out your errors. Whereas, back in the day, I might have gone, decades thinking that I had a mountain chickadee singing, when in fact I had a golden-crowned sparrow singing. But it's a very pretty song either way. All right, let's keep on going to this species. So obviously this was not in Carpinteria. We don't have this kind of snow in Carpinteria, but we have a lot of these sparrows. And in fact, they're quite widespread all across North America. Here's a recording of its call by Jared Swackheimer. Just this very high, thin, zip, zip. And there are a number of sparrows that have a version of that call that sound very similar to that. Here is a song from one of these sparrows. This recording is by Paul Marvin. And this is the Savannah Sparrow. Now there are a lot of variations of the Savannah Sparrow. And so I'm going to go ahead and click through. I've had these links that I've been ignoring up till now. But I'm going to go ahead and click through to the All About Birds website because I want to look at some examples of what these look like. So, a Savannah Sparrow has got this, it's white underneath with streaking. It's got this very streaky brown and black kind of streaking on the upper parts. This little bit of yellow near the beak in the lores, this part of the bird is called, is helpful. If it's there, it's a very good sign you're looking at a Savannah Sparrow, but it's not always there. So, you can't rely on it 100%. but I wanted to click through and show you some other examples of it. So you can see, here's an Ipswich Savannah Sparrow, which we don't have around here. But you see it's quite light colored compared to these other ones. And then this one, the Belding Savannah Sparrow, we do have around here. So this is the subspecies that actually breeds in the Carpinteria salt marsh. So I'm not sure if you know, in the histogram that we were looking at earlier, which showed all the species, I didn't really talk about it, but we have Savannah sparrows throughout the year because of the Belding Savannah Sparrows that hang out in the salt marsh in the breeding season. And this is a relatively dark version of the Savannah Sparrow, very dark streaking. And they hang out and they breed in the salt marsh. And then in the fall, where we get, till now, we get the sort of nominate, sort of what I think of as the normal Savannah sparrows, the non-salt marsh Savannah sparrows. They show up and they spend the winter here. So at this time of year, we have, really two different varieties of Savannah sparrows. We got the really dark ones, the Belding Savannah sparrows, and then we have the lighter ones that are more like where's a good example? Not this one, more like, there's a juvenile, more like this one, which is a little bit, not quite as dark as that Belding's. And then we also quite rarely could have one of these, which is the large-billed Savannah Sparrow, which actually lives in Mexico, in like Northwest Mexico and Baja California. Eve, I know you birdwatch down in the San Diego area a lot. Maybe you get these more often than we do, but occasionally they find their way into coastal Southern California. So if you see a Savannah Sparrow or a sparrow that seems kind of like a Savannah, but has this really big, really large beak, you may be looking at a large-billed subspecies of the Savannah Sparrow. And I talked about Rick Wright's book, the Peterson Reference Guide to Sparrows. One of the things he does is he has no patience for all this, subspecies nomenclatural back and forth. He just treats all of the subspecies as their own separate deals. He talks about the large-billed sparrow, and that's, a separate first-class entry in his book as far as he is concerned. So it's fun, as I say. I really enjoy his book. All right, but back we go to the presentation, and we'll move on to this species, which we also have a lot of around here. And here is a call that it makes. This is a recording by Thomas Megarian. And here's a recording of its song, also by Thomas Megarian. And there are a lot of varieties of that song. They all learn their own version of it, and there's slight variations from individual to individual and regional variations as you move around the country. But this is the song sparrow. Yeah, Joy, I see you got your hand up.
I know this is a very elementary question, but this is so new to me. My understanding is that all birds have a bird call and a bird song.
Yeah, and that's certainly a good starting point for how to think about it. A lot of birds have multiple different kinds of vocalizations, and we tend to classify them into calls and songs. And in general, calls are shorter. They're briefer vocalizations that they use for communication, contact, giving alarm. Songs are typically longer, more complex. They're used by the males typically to advertise their breeding territory. Although it turns out that females actually sing a lot as well, and we're learning more about that. And to a certain degree, those terms are just kind of arbitrary. The birds make a lot of different sounds and for a lot of different purposes. And just as a first whack at it, you can think I talk about calls and songs. But again, the song sparrow, it probably makes at least 3 or 4 different kinds of calls that a fairly dedicated human listener could learn to identify and distinguish. For these meetings, I try to pick out what I think are the most familiar calls, at least to me. But yeah, when I'm talking about calls versus songs, that's what I'm talking about. And it's sort of arbitrary, but it's, as I say, it's just a way of sort of simplifying the very complex reality of birds, because they are quite complex and have very interesting behaviors. So let's see where we were talking about the song sparrow. It's a relatively large sparrow. It's got a relatively long tail, although this particular one is all fluffed up and it doesn't really look like it's got such a long tail. You need to study your song sparrows out in the field. You need to spend good quality time with these sparrows to kind of learn what the range of individual variation is, so you can get more comfortable saying, oh, that one's more short-tailed and its coloration looks more like a Savannah sparrow. This one is longer-tailed and its coloration looks more like a song sparrow. And if they'll vocalize for you, again, it can be very helpful in making some of those distinctions. Oh, and this one. So it's like children, you don't want to have favorites, but this one is one of my favorites. I really like this sparrow. Here's a recording of its call by Paul Marvin. Got that cute little chip note. And here is its song, which I don't think I'm not that familiar with. I'm not sure that if I've heard it singing, I didn't realize that's what I was hearing. But this is a recording by Richard Webster. This is the Lincoln's sparrow. Or as Rick Wright would have it, he also really doesn't like the apostrophe S's on the bird names that have apostrophe S's. He just takes them off. He calls it a Lincoln sparrow. As I say, he has strong opinions about sparrows. And again, if you read his book, you'll learn more about his strong opinions. But whether you call it a Lincoln sparrow or a Lincoln's sparrow, this is what it looks like. And it's relatively small for a sparrow. It's sort of similar, at first glance, maybe to a song sparrow, but the streaking is finer. And certainly on an adult song sparrow, its streaking is going to be noticeably thicker, like these big, thick streaks. Whereas the Lincoln sparrow is these little pinstripes almost. And then it's got this sort of buffy wash on the sides, like it has this white belly and then buffy around the sides where the streaking is. Has a broad gray eyebrow. So this area up here is called the supercilium if you're being ostentatious, or eyebrow, but it's this area above the eye. And it's broad and gray in the Lincoln sparrow. And it contrasts with this buffy malar area, M-A-L-A-R, that comes down here. And a lot of sparrows have the ability to kind of make their crown feathers kind of peak up into almost like a crest, but the Lincoln sparrow does it a lot. So that little peaked crest look is a pretty common look for the Lincoln sparrow. All right, so with those 9 species, if you get familiar with those 9 species, you go out birding in Carpinteria, most of the sparrows you see, you're going to be on solid ground because you're going to be seeing one of those 9 species. Those are the sparrows I see most of the time when I'm birding around carp. So now I'm going to move on to some harder to see or less easy to see sparrows. And some of these, there's a lot fewer of them around, so that makes them hard. Or they tend to be more shy and hard to get a look at, so that makes them hard. They tend maybe not to be in Carpinteria. You have to maybe get a few miles outside Carp to get to where they tend to occur. And in a few cases, you have to get quite far out of Carpinteria to get to where they occur. But all of these, I kind of, and it's sort of arbitrary, I lumped them all together because these are the ones I felt like, if you made the effort, if you were willing to go travel to where they are at the right time of year and learn what they sound like, and what habitat to look for them in, you've got an excellent chance of seeing all 8 of these, if it's at the right time and you're in the right place. They're out there to be found. So let's go take a look at them. So I'll start off with this one. So this is a bird that actually does live in and around Carpinteria. It's a chaparral species, so it's not in the suburbs. It's up in the hillsides, and it's not super obvious about its presence unless you learn to recognize its vocalizations, in which case it is much easier to find. Here is a call that it makes. This is a recording by Lance Benner. It's a long recording, I ought to do it again. Probably a few looks right in the back. That's the sparrow singing. All right. Well, I wanted the call, but we'll go on. Here's a recording, another recording by Lance Benner. Yeah, so that's its song. I'm going to go back and play the first one because I want you to really hear that call note that it started off with at the beginning of the recording. Learn to recognize that. If you really want to see this sparrow, learn to recognize that call. And if you're up hiking around in the chaparral, you know, Ramiro Canyon up above Montecito is a place I can almost always see these if I'm up there. These are the Rufous-crowned Sparrow. It's a little bit fuzzy on the picture, but they do have a rufous crown, which is helpful. They're fairly large, you know, brown and kind of drab, even for a sparrow. They're pretty shy. You know, they will come out and give you a quick look, but they're not necessarily going to give you a good long look right in front of you the way some of these other sparrow species will. But very cool bird. All right, here's another sparrow. I'm just going to go a little faster. I'm not going to play its vocalizations, but if you want to see this one, you should learn its vocalizations. This is a relatively large sparrow. It's almost getting up there to Towhee sized. And this is a fox sparrow. And there are several different subspecies of this around. This, I think, is the one I see the most around here. They're, again, a chaparral sparrow. They hang around in the denser undergrowth. They like to be up at the higher elevations. You know, if you really want to see a fox sparrow, you know, go into eBird and look for the sightings map and go someplace where they've been seen. And, you know, again, be patient, listen for it, check the undergrowth, and if you're lucky, you'll see one. All right, so here is a refreshingly easy to identify sparrow. And I'm just going to play its song. This is a recording by Ted Floyd. He's quite the songster. Oops. It is the Lark Sparrow. And that head pattern is very distinctive. So again, it's a relatively large sparrow, very light underneath. They like grasslands, so you want to be out in a place probably with some wide open spaces, and that's where you're going to have your best shot at seeing lark sparrows. We don't have too many around Carpinteria. I have seen them at the Carpinteria Bluffs. You know, we don't have enough good extensive meadow habitat, but you get up into like Elwood Mesa in Santa Barbara. It's a nice big extensive meadow, and there's places there where people see lark sparrows pretty reliably. So it's quite an attractive bird. I mean, all these sparrows are attractive, but lark sparrows, I'm sure, you know, are especially proud of their appearance. Okay, so here's an interesting species. I will go ahead and play its song because it's kind of cool. Richard Webster's recording. And this is a chipping sparrow. And this is an adult on the left. You know, when I've seen them, I tend to see these immature versions more. They're much more muted in terms of their head pattern. But this is one of several species of Spizella sparrows. So the genus Spizella includes the chipping sparrow, and they are relatively small for sparrows. Like if they're around other sparrows, they're going to be the little tiny ones. And they've got relatively long tails, and they're quite similar looking in terms of, at least the three species I'm going to talk about today, are pretty similar looking. So if you're seeing a Spizella sparrow, if you think you've got a Spizella because it's really small and it's got this basic look to it, it's got the long tail, and it's kind of hopping around on the ground. The thing that is a really good help to separate the chipping sparrow, especially in these immature plumages, is that it has this dark line between the eye and the beak. So all of these Spizella sparrows I'm going to talk about have this dark line that extends behind the eye, but only the chipping sparrow has the dark line extend in front of the eye. So it's this dark lores, I guess the lores are right above it, but it's this dark eye line in front of the eye is a useful characteristic to tell you you've got a chipping sparrow. Okay. Am I going too fast? Am I going just fast enough? I see a thumbs up from Courtney. Okay, great. Oh boy, I really love these guys. All right, so this is a sparrow that has a song like this. This is Paul Marvin's recording. We actually talked about this species in the grassland birds meeting a few months ago. I actually want to back up and look at the histogram real quick. Okay, so here, this is a grasshopper sparrow that we're talking about now. And if you look at the histogram of eBird sightings in Santa Barbara County, you see it looks like we have it in the spring and summer, and then the line gets really thin the rest of the year. So it's not really clear if they show up, if they come here to breed and then leave and maybe just a few individuals stay. It seems just as likely that what's going on is they're here year round, but they are so shy and so hard to get a look at that we only report them to eBird. We only notice them when they're singing, when they're doing that song we just heard. Because grasshopper sparrows are super shy. Like some sparrows, so grasshopper sparrows and Savannah sparrows both live in the similar kinds of habitat. If you're in a big grassy field, you're going to have a bunch of Savannah sparrows in there. Maybe you're going to have some grasshopper sparrows. But if you walk through that field trying to see a sparrow, the Savannah sparrows are much more cooperative. Like they will fly up to get away from you and they'll perch on something to take a look at you, 100 feet away or whatever. And they'll stay there for a few seconds before they leave or go about their business. The grasshopper sparrows will not flush until you're right on top of them probably. And then they just fly low over the grass and then they drop out of sight again. They're just super hard to get a look at, except when the males are singing on their breeding territory, when they perch up on a rock or a bush and they make that sound we heard. So I was very excited when I first saw grasshopper sparrow in Santa Barbara County. They are around, I think they're around more of the year than we even realize, but they're hard to see if it's not the breeding season when the males are singing. But they are, they have a very short tail for a sparrow. They have a little bit of yellow in the lores, kind of like the Savannah sparrow does, but just proportions wise, they look completely different. And they're not all streaky on the breast the way a Savannah sparrow is. So it's a very different looking bird. Anyway, they have them up on, again, they like big meadows. So they have them up at, I think, Moore Mesa and Elwood Mesa in Santa Barbara, at least Elwood Mesa. I'm not sure about Moore Mesa, and various other places around Santa Barbara County. If you go look in eBird, you can find places that have Savannah sparrows. But if you go there looking for them now, you will definitely have your work cut out for you because they won't be singing. But go back in March or April, and then they'll be singing, and it'll be a lot easier. Here is a cool looking sparrow. So this is one of the ones that I mentioned that you have to kind of make a road trip if you want to go see these. This is a Bell's sparrow. And if you want to see this bird, and here I'll go ahead and click through to the All About Bird site so we can look at some more information about it. So it shows it throughout this region in terms of its range. You know what I actually want? I want to go to eBird and look up to show you where the sightings for this bird are. My apologies for not being better prepared here. Look for Bell's Sparrow. And we'll look in Santa Barbara County. And we'll do the large map. And we'll show the point sooner. And after all this, okay, so now you can see where they are. So, you know, this is Santa Barbara County, kind of broadly defined here. And you can see if you want to see the Bell's Sparrow, you really want to get up in the northeastern corner of the county. That's the best place to see them. In fact, you're actually outside of Santa Barbara County once you get up that far. But here along the Highway 33 and near Ventacopa, is off in the deserty areas east of Highway 33 is a good place to see them. But they are, I don't know, I think they're worth hunting down because I think they're really cool to look at. Okay, on we go. To this species. This is another one that I just think is super snazzy. So this is actually part of the same genus Spizella, I think, but it looks nothing like those chipping sparrows. This is the black-chinned sparrow, and it is sort of a desert species that expands its range westward in the breeding season and gets into, again, that sort of northeastern part of Santa Barbara County up in the Cuyama Valley. There's a few other places around Santa Barbara County where you can get them. But they're sort of like the grasshopper sparrow in the sense that they're easiest to find when the males are singing on their territory because they have this very distinctive song, and it sounds like this. This is a recording by Ed Pandolfino. I mean, it's hard to mistake that song. If you hear that song, you've got a black-chinned sparrow. All right, and then one more desert species. So I actually went and visited family in Arizona last week, and I saw a lot of these out there. This is a desert species that, again, if you want to see it in Santa Barbara County, you pretty much have to go up to that northeastern corner of the county. Where you will see a black-throated sparrow. And its head pattern is sort of similar to the Bell's Sparrow. Like if we go back and look at the Bell's Sparrow, you know, it's got like, the Bell's Sparrow has the white stripe down here, the white malar area, and it has a white eye line in front of the eye. But in the black-throated sparrow, that white eye line goes well back behind the eye. And in the males, they have this black throat also, the adult males. Okay, is that it for the, yeah, so that's it for the second group. And we come to the last group of sparrows. So these are the ones, you know, that I consider the most challenging. And they're not necessarily the most challenging in terms of the histograms. They've got some fairly thick lines there that indicate, you know, a fair number of reports of them during at least those parts of the year. I guess my sense of these is that for these, you not only have to go find where they are, but you kind of have to be lucky. They have to be there when you have to sort of strike it rich a little bit. You have to have the odds in your favor to pull one of these up. Yeah, Brody, I see you have your hand up.
When there was a green-tailed towhee around here, didn't you go and find it?
Yes, I've seen green-tailed towhees. I mean, and there was you know, if you kind of look at the histogram, we just sort of, we're in the time of the year when they're most likely to show up in Santa Barbara County, the end of September, the beginning of October. And there's been 3 or 4 of them reported in Santa Barbara County just in the last several weeks. But yeah, it is a really neat bird. And I guess maybe I forget why I talked about it. I think just because I'd seen one recently, so I was excited about it.
Yeah, yeah, because I have my eBird alert set up. And I just saw, ooh, a green-tailed towhee. John Callender.
Yes, my fame. Well,
Yeah.
and then, as I say, several people have reported them recently.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun to see a rare bird.
Yeah.
You can also just drive a few hours to where they occur normally, and then you can just see that bird anytime you want. So, the game of chasing after these rarities and trying to make the list bigger is certainly a fun game. But I think, for myself, I appreciate even more the fun of seeing the bird because it's such a neat looking bird. All right, so so as I was saying, these are 6 species that you can see in Santa Barbara County if you play your cards right and get a little lucky. So let's look at them. And then, so this is actually the bird we were just talking about. This is my photo of the green-tailed towhee from out at San Miguelito Road is where I saw this. And it even, perched on the barbed wire and let me get a photo before it disappeared. So that was very fun. But it's a pretty distinctive looking bird. It's it's a sparrow technically, but a big one. It does have a characteristic vocalization that I want to share. So this is what its call sounds like. This is Ed Pandolfino made this recording. So if you hear that, you're talking about a green-tailed towhee. And if you're on their breeding territory where they're singing, they sound like this. That was a recording by Ron Overholtz. Yeah, so, as I say, like if I look at the range map for them, they're, I guess, sort of, we're in their winter range here. But it's a good bird to see in Santa Barbara County. If you see one of those, you're having a good day of birding. All right, and then we'll come to this species, which I really like. So this is another, I think these are Zonotricias also, like with the white-crowned sparrow. I think they're in the same genus. They're pretty similar in terms of overall shape. But this, in fact, is the white-throated sparrow. And it has its song, sounds like this. It was recorded by Ken Otter. And I actually want to click through on these because there's a cool thing about them that I wanted to point out. So, it shows them like along the coast in California that we're in their wintering range. That's not what to do. I'm going to click on here. So this, I think, is really interesting. So there is the white striped version of it, right, that we were looking at a second ago. But then there's also this tan striped version. And this isn't a male, female, or an adult immature thing. This is just a different morph. Like white-throated sparrows occur in both the tan striped and the black and white striped versions. And, pairs of them tend to have one of each. So you'll have a male white striped and a female tan striped, or a male tan striped and a female white striped, which I think is just really interesting. I mean, I don't know what's going on with that, but it's just this cool thing that these birds have. And we have them around Carpinteria. Usually, we've got maybe a 50-50 chance on any given Carpinteria Christmas bird count, whether we've got a white-throated sparrow staked out somewhere in the count circle that we can get on count day. So in the wintertime, just a few of them show up here and hang out. So check eBird, see where they've been reported, go see if you can find the bird. They're pretty cool bird. Again, sort of similar to a white-crowned sparrow, at least in terms of that crown pattern. But these yellow lores are very distinctive in the white throat. Very nifty sparrow. Another bird that doesn't really belong here, but shows up every once in a while is the swamp sparrow. Sort of similar maybe to a song sparrow, but it doesn't have the streaking, or has a little bit of streaking, but not the heavy streaking that a song sparrow has. And this sort of contrasty rufous wings are helpful. I haven't seen one of these in a couple of years now. I would love to see one. So if someone sees one in Santa Barbara County, let me know or post it to eBird and then I'll know right away and I can go see if I can see it. Oh, so this is a fun sparrow. This is a Vesper Sparrow, and it's kind of similar to a Savannah Sparrow in that it's sort of white below with streaking. It's got this white eye ring that a Savannah Sparrow can also kind of have. Tends, in my experience, to be a little more obvious. Its tail is longer than a Savannah Sparrow's tail, and its outer tail feathers are white. Not as obviously as the dark-eyed Juncos, but if you see them in flight and they spread their tail, you can often see a little narrow white strip on either side of the tail. And it's got this little tiny rufous patch on the shoulder that you normally can't see, but if you do see it, that's very helpful too. That's a Vesper Sparrow. And then here is another of those Spazellas we were talking about with the chipping sparrow. This is the Brewer's Sparrow, and kind of similar looking to a young chipping sparrow, an immature chipping sparrow. But remember when I was talking about how the chipping sparrow had the dark line between the eye and the beak? The Brewer's Sparrow really doesn't have that. It's sort of plain in front of the eye. And overall, its head pattern is pretty muted compared to some of the other Spazella sparrows. So if you see a Spazella sparrow, it's small with a long tail, and it's got this kind of Spazella head pattern, but it's not really boldly patterned on the head. Maybe a Brewer's Sparrow. You know, it's a sparrow that doesn't really hang out in large numbers in Santa Barbara County. Up in the northeastern corner of the county, you can get some of them usually. But that is the Brewer's Sparrow. And then here is the closely related clay-colored sparrow, which is another Spazella sparrow, very similar to the Brewer's Sparrow or the chipping sparrow. But again, unlike the chipping sparrow and like the Brewer's Sparrow, it's plain in front of the eye, but its head pattern is stronger than the Brewer's Sparrow. So if you see, I mean, there's some other things to look for, but at least in terms of what I try and keep in mind, if you've got a Spazella sparrow that's got a relatively strong face pattern, you know, relatively high contrast face pattern, this dark malar stripe here, or this dark mustache line here, compare that to the Brewer's Sparrow is a much fainter mustache line, or at least somewhat fainter. There's subtle differences. These are both pretty rare sparrows for Santa Barbara County. So if you see one, you should study it and get photos if you can, and then you can, you know, study it at your leisure. But that's the clay-colored sparrow. And I think that is it. Those are all the sparrows. But then I threw in some photos at the end for a Spazella quiz, because you can tell I'm all excited about the Spazella sparrows and just how fun they are to try and figure out. So here are just some photos, some very bad photos. So this is, these are some sparrows that were at River Park, east of Lompoc, back in December of 2018. And so if you're looking at these sparrows, you know, you can probably be forgiven to say, oh man, they're all little brown jobs. They're very similar, especially when they're fuzzy. Yeah, Brody, what do you think you see here?
Rufous-crowned Sparrow.
Well, that's a good guess. There is rufous on their crowns, so at least in a you know, descriptive sense, they are Rufous-crowned sparrows, but they are not actually Rufous-crowned sparrows. They're not the sparrows that are officially called Rufous-crowns. And in fact, there are two different species here. I'll give you another hint. The big one is a relatively common one, and the small one is a much rarer one. And the small one is the Spazella. So, and this is the same individual. This photo and this photo shows the same bird. And then these are the other species that are with it. All right, I will end the suspense. This is a clay-colored sparrow. This was my first ever clay-colored sparrow. I was very happy I chased out to the park where it had been seen, and I spent an hour looking at all the sparrows in the park, and I was looking in the wrong place, and finally I had given up and was walking back to my car, and there was one more group of sparrows, and there it was. So it's a little smaller than these white-crowned sparrows, and these are like immature white-crowned sparrows. So, you know, again, they do have rufous on their crowns, but they are white-crowned sparrows. And I don't know, it's a little smaller. It's got the relatively strong face pattern for a Spizella sparrow. I don't know. I am positive I would not have been able to pick this out and identify it as a clay-colored sparrow myself. Certainly not the me of December 2018. Could not have done that. But I knew it was there. I was looking specifically for this bird, and I managed to get some blurry photos that the people who really know their Spizella sparrow said, yeah, that's the bird. So I was like, whew, I got the bird. All right, let's go on to quiz photo number 2. So this is at the eBird hotspot known as the Southern Cuyama Grasslands, which is just this little spot you can pull off Highway 33 out in that northeastern kind of deserty part of Santa Barbara County. And in the fall and winter, or on into the spring, I guess, early spring, it's a really great spot to see sparrows because they're just all hanging out there. So here again, we have 2 cool sparrows. The little one is a Spizella sparrow. And I just thought it was neat that they were perched right next to each other because it really gave me a great contrast between the look of the 2 of them.
Is the bigger one maybe a white-throated sparrow?
Well, once again, Brody, it is a sparrow with a white throat. So in a certain sense, yes, that is true. But no, it is not a white-throated sparrow, not the sparrow that is called the white-throated sparrow. This bigger one is, in fact, the Vesper sparrow. And you can't see the white outer tail feathers. This is a good indication of how it can be hard to see the white outer tail feathers of the Vesper sparrow when it's perched. But if this bird were to fly and spread its tail feathers, I am reasonably confident you would have seen little strips of white on the outsides. Now this, I think, is your Vesper sparrow. And then this one is the Spizella with these sort of muted face pattern. So I ended up saying this was a brewer's sparrow.
I've got to admit, this is really hard doing the sparrows.
They are hard, you know, they are challenging. They all look the same at a certain, you know, if you let your eyes go a little fuzzy, it's like these birds look very similar. But something that does emerge, at least for me, as I look at this photo, the body shape and size and everything and the proportions of the beak and the head, they're quite different. And if you learn to key in on those parts, it'll really help you in your identifying of sparrows. Don't focus so much on field marks and plumage patterns. I mean, you need to get to that because you need to consider everything. But think more in terms of the bird's outline, the bird's silhouette. You know, what shape is it? How big or small is it? And that can be hard to if you don't have a yardstick next to it. But if you've got another sparrow next to it, that sparrow can be your yardstick. So you know, even if you don't know exactly how big or small these are, you know that one is significantly smaller than the other. All right,
But I do agree with Brody. It is very hard.
Well, and you know, I've got the benefit that I've stared at this photo a lot, and I've stared at this photo with my, you know, Peterson reference guide to sparrows open next to me, going photo by photo. So if I sound, I probably am, and I'm probably also sounding more confident than I should. Maybe I'm completely misidentifying these sparrows. They do look very, very similar to each other and to every other sparrow. Okay, one last one. All right, so this is at Elwood Mesa in Santa Barbara in April of 2019. The one on the right is a Spizella sparrow. The one on the left is a much more common local sparrow. It's not a great photo, so you're not getting a great view of either of these birds. But I was excited walking along and suddenly, whoa, look, this is a different sparrow. All right, so I am saying this one on the right is again a brewer's sparrow with that sort of muted face pattern. And this one on the left is a Savannah Sparrow. So the white belly with the thicker streaks, relatively short tail, little bit of yellowish. The light's not great in this photo, but you can kind of see it's got a little bit of yellow there in front of the eye. That's helpful. So I'm not sure if my goal was to sort of whet your appetite for going out there and challenging yourself with sparrows, but maybe I've whetted your appetites a little too much. Maybe you're like, oh my God, the sparrows are over, thank goodness. Yeah, the sparrows are over. That's it for sparrows.
It was very good. Thank you very
well,
much.
it was definitely sparrowy. We'll give it that. Okay, well, thank you all of you who stuck around this long. Clearly you have what it takes to study your sparrows. So You know, go make friends with some real sparrows out in the field. This is sparrow season in Santa Barbara County. They're out there to be seen. You can go out and come to appreciate their unique, muted, camouflaged charms. Does anyone have any other feedback or suggestions for the next meeting? I haven't really given it any thought. You know, I had my trip to Arizona, then I was like all sparrows all the time. Yeah, Courtney, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, you know, we were talking a little bit about the joy and adventure of looking for rare species. I don't think it's a program unto itself, but I wonder if you could highlight some of the rare species that had been seen in the week or two leading up to a program, so to kind of get a sense of why it's unusual, what's significant about it, and where we might go to best improve the chances of actually seeing it.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, in part because I'm doing that anyway, obviously. I mean, I'm keeping up on that. You know, I don't really read the daily newspaper these days, but I certainly keep up with the daily eBird reports. And yeah, I'd be happy to do a meeting on that, either partly on that or completely on that. I see a thumbs up from Tom, so that's good. Brody, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a suggestion?
One other thing that I was thinking that we might be able to do that we have so many of are ducks.
Oh, you had mentioned ducks. Yeah, you had previously put in a request for ducks. And it is starting to be duck season around Carpinteria. We're starting to get some more interesting ducks show up. All right, well, maybe we can do a combo meeting next time. I can try and force myself to do a quick version of ducks and also discuss some of the recent rarities and, you know, how to go about chasing after them if you want to go chase after them. I mean, we're still kind of in a mode probably where it's not the most responsible to be, you know, running out of the house and driving to the far corners of the county for birds. You know, it's not maybe the most essential of travel, and we're trying to cut down on non-essential travel to limit the spread of COVID-19. So, you know, maybe just a little bit of chasing or a little bit of local chasing. Anyway, I'll see what I can come up with. I'll put together a meeting, check the blog to see what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. But I think there's a good chance we'll do some ducks, and we'll also do some rarities, some discussion of how to find local rarities or what rarities have been seen. And, you know, that sounds like fun to me. And if you have any other suggestions, just send an email. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming and having a fun sparrow meeting. Yeah, Brody, you have something else?
I was just wondering, isn't your email on the carpwithoutcars.org?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
It is jbc@jbcsystems.com.
Okay, thank you.
I should have registered a shorter domain. It would have been easier for people to type. Okay, so thank you everybody, and go out and see some sparrows or some broad-winged hawks or a curlew sandpiper or just whatever you have around your house. They're all good birds.
Thank you.
Yeah, so long.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye.